Hey guys, welcome to my review of BMW's 330e Touring. To the best of my knowledge, this is the first hybrid Touring or estate that BMW have ever produced. You can get this model in a rear-wheel drive only, or, like this particular press car, in xDrive. The rear-wheel drive version starts at about £43,500 here in the UK, and this xDrive version starts at a tad over 45 grand. This particular model is at an interesting price point because it sits about £1,000 above the 330i, which is a petrol combustion engine only model, and it sits about £1,000 below the brilliant 330d, which is the diesel model. Many of you know that I get very excited about anything with a 30D in the BMW lineup because that straight six turbo diesel engine is phenomenal, especially for a family wagon like this. Very economical, plenty of torque, plenty of power, and very efficient. So it'd be interesting to see how this hybrid stacks up against that and the petrol equivalent. Although the base price of this is 45 odd thousand pounds, this being a BMW press car, well, it actually has £9,000 worth of options thrown at it. So that puts it at about 54 grand on the road. We'll go through those options once we jump inside and I've got the spec sheet to hand. Under the bonnet, we have BMW's familiar B48 engine, which is a 2-litre 4-cylinder turbocharged unit. Across the BMW range, it puts out various outputs, but in this particular car, we're looking at 184 horsepower and 300 newton meters of torque, which is exactly the same figures that the B48 in my long-termer 420i produces. And this actually weighs a bit more. We're talking about 1,950 odd kilos. It's a heavy car, partly due to the xDrive system and partly due to all the hybrid gubbins that is hiding underneath. Thankfully, you don't need to rely on just the combustion engine in this car. We've obviously got the electric motor too, and that alone produces 113 horsepower and 265 newton meters of torque. So almost the same amount of torque as the combustion engine. But when you combine the two, it's actually limited in here. So this car will give you a maximum of 292 horsepower and 420 newton meters of torque. That means when you have the electric power or energy available, this car will do a claim 0 to 62 in just 5.9 seconds and go onto a top speed of 139 miles an hour. But you do need that electric power to produce those figures. We'll test the claim 0 to 62 figure a bit later on. Jumping in here, well, it's lovely, and that's no big surprise because it's a BMW 3 Series, and as most of you know, this is one of my favourite cabins. There are some cheaper plastics hidden away, like here on the B pillar and a bit down lower, but otherwise everything in here feels such good quality and everything works so well. Driving position, pretty much spot on. Steering wheel is lovely, a little bit fat, but this isn't a high performance model, so that doesn't offend me or upset me too much. I'm not too sure of this particular trim down here. But as I say, everything is functionally so good in here. We've got the operating system 7 digital cockpit. This car has also got the head-up display, so I'm not sitting here wanting more. But you'd kind of expect that. As we said outside, it has £9,000 worth of options. In fact, let's have a look what they are. So the paintwork on the outside is mineral grey, which is one of my favourite BMW colours, and in fact, the same colour that my M140i was back in 2018. I really like the colour, and it does tend to suit the majority of BMWs. Inside, well, we have the oyster coloured leather, and this is the Vanaska leather, which is the harder wearing leather, and it's very easy to remove stains and stuff. Yes, if you had some toddlers or really young kids, it probably wouldn't be the colour of choice. But the flip side is it just makes the cabin feel like such a nice and special place. So the mineral grey paint, 670 quid. The oyster leather is a no cost option. This then has the visibility pack, which consists of BMW's laser lights and the high beam assist. That's £1,500. Technology pack, which is the head-up display we've already talked about. Loudspeaker system, Harman Kardon, very good in the 3 and 4 Series. Enhanced Bluetooth with wireless charging, so we've got a wireless charging bay down there just in front of the cup holders. Most modern mobile phones fit in there, but there are one or two. I think the Galaxy S21 or something, the one that Matt Watson's got, I don't think that fits in there quite, but it's a reasonable charging bay. We've also got a USB down there, and we've got a USB-C port in this little cubby hole here. Technology pack is 1900 quid. We then have the premium pack, which is also 1900 pounds, and that consists of panoramic glass sunroof, a must have in this sort of car as far as I'm concerned, especially if you're using it as a family car. Electric front seats, driver one has memory, not necessarily like a must have, but nice all the same, especially if you're sharing the car. You can have your own settings, your own setup. And lumbar support on the driver and front passenger seat. We then have the comfort pack, which is 890 quid, and that is steering wheel heating. Again, very nice thing to have in the winter months. A comfort access, which is basically keyless access. Luggage compartment package. So I believe that's the separating net and, well, I call it the dog net. So you can have no parcel shelf, and there's basically a net that comes up between the rear headrests and the roof to stop things like dogs or heavy objects in the boot flying forward if you hit the brakes or have an accident. And then extended storage. So again, that's probably some of the extra little sort of compartments in the boot, and maybe something in the cabin, I don't know. Then we have the M Sport Pro package, £2,200, and that gives you these 18-inch non-run flat bi-colour alloy wheels. It gives you the M Sport braking system, so the nice big blue brake calipers that you can see out there. I believe the discs on the front are slightly bigger as well. Adaptive M Sport suspension, a must-have option. We'll talk about that once we get it out on the road. Variable sports steering. It's like a variable steering rack. Yeah. Sun protection glass. Well, you either love it or you hate it. I think it definitely looks good on this mineral grey car. M seat belts. Basically, you can see the M stripes and the seat belts. I really wish that BMW would only put that on their M cars, but hey, they're trickling it down into everything. And BMW individual high gloss shadow line with extended contents. I believe that's all of the sort of black detailing on the outside of the car, where you'd normally find chrome. It's black, and again, black goes so well with the mineral grey, so thumbs up for that. But the rest of the equipment in here is all standard. You do get a fair chunk of standard equipment in a base 3 Series, so don't feel that you have to go for that 9 grand's worth of options. You could certainly strip out 4 or 5 grand of that and you'd have yourself a very nice 3 Series Touring. Before we go out, I would just like to talk about benefit in kind or company car tax. Most people tend to buy this sort of car, hybrid or a fully electric car, to avoid or cut down on their company car tax. To give you an example, this has a benefit in kind rate of 11%, whereas a petrol equivalent like the 330i or diesel equivalent, the 330d, is around 36 or 37%. So you're going to end up paying over 3 times as much company car tax for one of those compared to this. When you look at it like that, it's no wonder that, well, company car owners are buying hybrids and EVs, because in that scenario, it's almost a no-brainer. So what I really want to find out today with this video, a bit like with the X5 45e, if you didn't watch that video, there's a link to it up here. What I want to find out is, are you sacrificing loads having a car like this compared to a petrol or diesel equivalent? Or is it actually a genuine viable option? And if you're going to be saving a lot of company car tax, then is it a no-brainer? Okay, first things first, let's test out its claimed acceleration figures. BMW say this 330e xDrive Touring will do the 0 to 62 sprint in just 5.9 seconds. Definitely feels a bit quicker than that because of the instant torque fill off the line. My race box is ready. I've got all the traction control systems turned off. I'm in extra boost mode, which is a sports mode. I'm in sports automatic. Left foot is hard down on the brake, right foot on the accelerator, and here we go. Oh, off the line, very hard. That's 40 already. And there we go. 5.12 seconds. Miles quicker than they claim, although their claimed figure is to 62 miles now, and that's to 60, so you can add a tenth to that, but that's still 5.2 seconds. It's well over half a second quicker than BMW claim, which isn't unusual because they're very conservative with their acceleration figures, but that is a fair old chunk, and it definitely feels like a 5-second car to 60 miles an hour. But it will only do that when it has electrical energy available. Similar to its bigger brother, the X5 45E, which I had in the channel a few months ago, this 330 also has a couple of unique buttons down here by the iDrive controller and the gear selector. My favourite being the battery control button. That basically enables me to keep the required amount of battery power in the battery pack for when I need it. For example, I've now got it set at 100%, so the combustion engine will be constantly running no matter what my journey requires, and that will be constantly charging the battery up for when I might need it. So if I'm heading into London now, when I get to the end of the journey, when I enter, let's say, the M25, I can then switch it onto electric only. And BMW claim that should give me a 34-mile range in electric only. In reality, you don't get anywhere near that, and just like its bigger brother in the X5 45E, you actually get around 21 to 22 miles on a full charge. I'd like to know if anyone out there that has either the X5 or one of these 330Es has managed to get, let's say, more than about 23 or 24 miles, because from owners that I've spoken to and from tests that I've done myself, that seems to be about the maximum range. And it is bizarre that BMW underquote their acceleration figures but massively overquote their range figures for electric only on their hybrids. But BMW aren't the only one that do that. In fact, every hybrid that I've tried and every electric vehicle that I've tried has massively overquoted it. So it must be something to do with the way they test them, and I genuinely think that the WLTP tests are favoured towards hybrids and EVs because that's where the governments want us to go. So they almost tweak those tests to make them look better than they are. The plus side, obviously, of having the hybrid compared to, say, an electric car only is when that 22-23 miles of range runs out, which it will do fairly quickly, you've obviously got the combustion engine to back you up. The issue with that, though, is as good as the B48 2-litre 4-cylinder turbocharged engine is, in this one it's the lower tunes, the same as the 420i as we talked about on the outside. That's only 184 horsepower and 300 newton meters of torque. That's pushing around near on 2 tons of car. So it feels quite underpowered when it doesn't have the electrical energy to help. What ends up happening is when you run out of electrical energy and you're relying solely on that 2-litre combustion engine, you end up with quite shocking fuel consumption figures. The best I've seen is about 26 or 27 miles to the gallon, and I'm sure that would get a little bit better on a longer run, but you've got to remember it's a fairly underpowered engine carting around a very heavy car with all that hybrid running gear, etc., and batteries. So BMW's claim of almost 157 mpg on the combined cycle is complete nonsense. You could make that happen, I'm guessing, in the most ideal situation with a full battery over a, let's say, 25-mile journey, where you're using the battery for 23 miles of that, and then you have to rely on the combustion engine for the last 2. But otherwise, you're never going to get anywhere close to that claimed range. You're just not. You've got to take my word for that. Let's be honest, the main reason you would go for a 330e over a 330i or the brilliant 330d is for benefit in kind, company car tax. That must be the main reason, because if that's not your main reason, then you really need to rethink your strategy, because don't think buying one of these is A, saving the planet, or B, going to give you more efficiency than a combustion engine only version of this car, because you're just not. You don't get energy from nowhere, and the electrical energy that's available has too short a range. But there is a small caveat to that. If you have a garage and you have your own charging system at home or at work, and the majority of your journeys are under, let's say, 30 miles or under 25 miles, then this particular car does make sense, because you can then rely mostly on the electrical energy. You can use it as an EV, and when you need to call on the combustion engine, you can use that. So it would almost be the perfect car for that scenario. Use it every day for your 20-mile journey, and then when you want to go away on the weekend, or you go away on a family holiday, you've got the relatively small 40-litre fuel tank and combustion engine to back you up. So you've got that big range, probably 350-mile range if you need it, and then you can fill it up in minutes and off you go. So there is a caveat to the business user only. It does make sense in certain scenarios, providing you have charging equipment either at work or at your home. Bearing all of that in mind, what is this 330e like to drive? What's it like when you put it into hybrid and the dampers are knocked back into comfort, because this has the adaptive damper option, which is always an option worth having on modern BMWs. It just takes the edge off the ride, and I have to say, its ride quality and comfort feels amazing. It feels just like any other 3 Series really. You're slightly aware of its excess weight when you're just cruising around, but really not by much. And in fact, you could be lost in thinking you're in a 330i. I mean, you get the same sounds, sometimes you get no sounds, especially if you do knock it back into electric, and it is nice to do that sometimes, especially at the end of a journey when you're arriving back into your village, town or city. There's something really nice and satisfying about just knocking it back into EV mode, or getting up in the morning and leaving wherever it is that you live. I know my M2, for instance, on a cold start with the Remus exhaust, probably annoys the hell out of my neighbours, whereas this, I could creep off in the morning. But remember, when that combustion engine does fire up eventually, it's stone cold, so you don't always get maximum power from the combustion engine because it's cold. And I can't see how that's going to be any good for the car over its longevity of life. What's it like when we whack it into sports, stiffen everything up and push it through some corners? Okay, I'm in sports now. I've got extra boost, I've got plenty of battery capacity left, so we've got full power available. Coming into here, some of my favourite corners, well, that's where I can feel the weight coming down that hill and coming through here. That's where you can feel the excess weight of this car compared to a combustion engine only car. You really can. The minute you start trying to push this car, you're very aware of its extra weight. It doesn't lose all of its ability. It certainly still feels very BMW, very nimble, even though this is on the xDrive platform, so we've got loads of grip available, especially on a lovely dry day like today. But you're just aware of its extra mass as we come through here and over that little lip. It just feels heavy. It's controlling its weight well, as all of these heavier cars do. I mean, the technology and stuff they've learnt from controlling the weight of a very heavy SUV has obviously trickled down into this 3 Series Touring. It manages its weight very well, and when it is stiffened up, it does feel almost sporty, but certainly not as good as a 330d or 330i, and definitely not as good as an M340i. That's something we haven't even touched upon, because I think that's a different category of car. This lists or retails with all the options at 54 odd grand, and that's well into M340i territory. That's where my money would go. But like we've talked about, these cars are being bought by company car owners for completely different reasons. You know, when we're talking about company car tax, this is a fraction of what an M340i or an M340d would cost. In short, if this 330e xDrive Touring ticks all the right boxes for you in terms of saving you a lot of company car tax, etc., or you are those handful of people that have a big garage at home and can install some charging equipment and use your car mostly for sub 30-mile journeys, then this car, just like the X5 45e, will make sense, because it does sacrifice a minimum amount. I'm sitting in here feeling like I'm in a normal BMW, and I think that's the best sort of compliment I could give it. It feels every bit as quick as its combined 292 horsepower suggests, but you've got to remember that when that electrical energy does run out, and it will, if I went up and down this road a few times booting it, that energy is going to disappear, and then I'm stuck with 184 horsepower and only at 300 newton meters of torque, and all of a sudden this car that feels relatively brisk starts to feel quite sluggish and slow. So again, it's good in certain periods of time, but if you catch it out when it doesn't have any electrical energy, it does feel a little bit slow compared to what you might think it should do. You're not going to get that in a 330d. That's always going to feel punchy all of the time, because it's a brilliant car, and I wish that the world and the governments didn't hate diesels, because 330d is just the perfect recipe. Anyway guys, thanks a lot for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you want to see more on this 330e, please head over to my Yes Auto page. There's a link below in the description where I give you 5 reasons that I love about this 330e xDrive Touring. Until the next video, take it easy, and I'll see you soon.